Greetings to the brightest audience in the country. This is Real Science Radio. I'm Fred Williams.
And I'm Doug McBurney, Bible student, science geek, amateur comedian. It's good to be back with you, Fred, talking about real science on Friday.
Well, Doug, it's great to have you back, especially after all the storms you've been weathering down there in Southern California. I heard you even had a tornado down there in San Diego. That's got to be pretty rare.
I don't know that I've ever heard of it. And it was a tornado warning. And as far as we know, the tornado never actually touched the ground. But yeah, it was pretty freaky. A little scary.
Well, for those who don't know, Doug had to drop out of our interview last week with Dr. James Tour. That was a great interview, and we're going to play the rest of that interview on today's show. But Doug, I guess your internet went out, and I'm sure it's probably from all that water damage and maybe that
tornado. That's right. It was raining, Fred. When it rains here, nothing works. It's kind of like when it snows in Texas.
That's like in Missouri. If you get 1 inch of snow, everything shuts down. But, in Colorado, where we're used to it, you'd have to have a couple feet before things start to shut down here. But yeah, so you had to drop out, and we were able to finish that interview. We had some great stuff. In fact, he talked about some real promising research that he's been doing with a team of his on cancer and, attacking even the most invasive types like pancreatic cancer. So that's going to be really cool to get into that. And Doug, he also talked about research he's doing with graphene. And if you remember graphene, that's something that you had brought to Real Science Radio, something you became interested in. And we did a show on that, I don't know, maybe about a year ago that we'll link to.
Someone in our audience had asked if we had heard about, was there graphene in the COVID vaccine?
Oh, yeah.
I remember. And so not only did I not know if there was graphene in the COVID vaccine, I didn't know what graphene was. I hadn't really heard of it or been aware of it. And when you start looking into it, it's pretty amazing. And the possibilities are phenomenal, but the production of graphene is difficult, expensive, dirty, and that's apparently what Dr. Tour is involved in is trying to figure out how to make it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you had done so much. You ended up, I think, really got involved with researching graphene. If I remember, you spent like at least a couple weeks before we did the show. So we'll again link back to that, and Dr. Tour is going to talk about that. So
I just want to quickly mention, we talked about all the rain in Southern California, and I just want to remind the audience that Bob Enyart was an advocate of earthquake research. Bob was convinced that if the governments of the world would spend more time, effort, and money working on how to predict earthquakes instead of focusing on how to break up families and replace fathers with welfare checks and all the other things government does. Bob was an advocate that we could save a lot of lives, prevent a lot of damage and a lot of misery because the earth is young. The crust of the earth is relatively unstable due to all kinds of catastrophic activity. And so Bob knew that earthquakes are not only a problem throughout history, but they're going to get even worse because of the nature of the world. And so I was just informed of a theory about earthquakes that relates to all this rain that's been happening in Southern California. So it's been raining here for most of the last 3 weeks, and it might rain another week from now. We might get another one of these atmospheric rivers, and the ground is soaked, saturated. There's nowhere for the water to go except to run across the land toward the ocean, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're talking about trillions and trillions and trillions of gallons of water, you're putting an awful lot of weight on a part of the earth that's already seismically active, unstable. And so I'll link to an article that I read that's just really interesting because there have been earthquakes at least theoretically, possibly linked to flood events in the past, back when the Colorado River used to flood out here before the Hoover Dam and all that. And so all this water could mean Southern California all of California is a lot more vulnerable to earthquakes until this water event ends. And I just wanted to mention that because I thought Bob's opinions and efforts on behalf of earthquake prediction will prove to be yet another one of the prophetic things that Bob's worldview and his relationship with the Creator gave him insight on that we may not realize until years and years from now.
Yeah.
It's really
you've had record rainfall out there. In fact, I think your Los Angeles River is actually a river now, right?
You can actually see videos. Most people know of the Los Angeles River, and you laugh at it because it's a giant concrete culvert that's usually full of dust and like broken down cars and homeless encampments. But not now. It's running, baby.
Yeah. So, you mentioned the earthquake stuff, and of course that has a tie-in with the hydroplate theory. You're in that ring of fire area where, you can get earthquakes more often. You're in a very seismically active area. And the hydroplate theory talks about how the Pacific basin sunk in and you still have this seismic activity. And if scientists would just, look at different approaches at what causes earthquakes, because the hydroplate theory has the best explanation for them. And Doug, I guess I'd want to warn you, if you see any lightning leaving the surface of the earth and going up, towards the clouds, you might want to duck and take cover, because that could mean earthquakes are happening, right? Because people used to doubt earthquake lights. They thought it was like, a myth or just people's imaginations, like UFO type stuff. But no, over time, secular scientists actually came to realize earthquake lights are real. And what they are is, the granite and the voltage that's formed, all that with the plates moving around, Doug, and causing this piezoelectric effect, and you create electricity, and you can get lightning actually shooting from the ground and going up into space. It's pretty interesting stuff. And we've done shows on earthquake lights. And, we'll have to do another show in the future and talk about earthquakes, but that's a great point. I didn't think of that. So you've got so much water that's threatening, that could cause an earthquake. Wow. Okay.
Well, it doesn't help.
Yeah. So, Doug, how was your Valentine's Day, by the way? We just got through another, one of those holidays, so to speak.
Yes. Valentine's Day. So, my wife and I, we generally don't do anything elaborate on Valentine's Day because we generally don't do anything elaborate on any holidays, but especially Valentine's Day. We were together. It was romantic at times, and it was very nice with some good food and some good conversation. And just to be with someone for 30 some, I should probably nail this on the nose or I'll get in trouble. 30, it'll be 36 years at some point this year. Let's just leave it at that. And married for well over 30. And so it was wonderful. And I like Valentine's Day. I used to think it was kind of a hokey holiday, but that was before the world went to war against normalcy.
Yeah.
And now I see Valentine's Day as just one more relic of normalcy that the left is just intent on tearing down. And so I like Valentine's Day more and more, actually.
I think Valentine's Day is really Cupid.
Oh, no.
That was bad.
Please shoot me. Oh, no, not an arrow reference. Yeah. No, don't go down that road, Doug. Don't do it.
Well, my wife and I, we've been married for, I think, 32 years. Yeah, I better get that right, too. So, but Valentine's Day, it's funny. Valentine's Day, to me, I was kind of like bah humbug, because in my dating life before I met my wife, I never had a girlfriend on Valentine's Day. There was always, some other time. And so I kid with my wife about that. And truth be told, I'm probably subconsciously looking for a way out of having to give her flowers on Valentine's Day. But she sees right through it, and we do celebrate it. We went out to dinner this last week, a nice meal. Anyways, back to the business at hand. We do have quite a show planned today for everybody. Again, we're going to get into James' tour, the end of his interview. But Doug, of course, we can't skip our interesting fact of the week. But before we even start that, you really nailed it last week. I mean, it's the first controversy we've had on our new segment, which really I could even call it Stump the Co-Host. But this time, you kind of hit it out of the park. I was really surprised, actually. You surprised both me and Dr. James Tour when I asked you what's the largest organ in the human body, and the correct answer is supposed to be liver. But you said the interstitium? Interstitium?
Well, so I actually pronounced it as I had heard it, which was interstitia. And so I'll link to this article too. I want to talk about this because there's still something of I don't know if I'd call it a controversy, but it's not a settled issue. And so when I read the article, I thought, you know what? There's a pretty good chance that this is actually a functioning organ in and of itself. It's not just space. And so I'll link to the article from 2018 and you be the judge. But I have not been able to find any ongoing debate or responses to the article. But we'll post it up because since we do have the brightest audience in the country, it's possible they could find us an update and let us know what's happening with the interstitium.
Well, you know, eventually science comes around. For example, they eventually realize there's a 10th continent, you know, New Zealandia. And maybe they'll eventually say, hey, there's actually this new organ. They add it to the list of hundreds of organs we already have. And hopefully it won't be it won't be like the mythological things when they add millions and billions of years to whatever crackpot theory they have. But Doug, I had to give you that one. That one surprised me, but it's like Jeopardy, you know, the show Jeopardy, where every now and then after the fact, they find out that a contestant answered something actually correctly, but not the way they expected. It was another way to answer a question that was accurate. So your response was a reasonable possibility. So I have to give you that one. So I don't know if we'll ever have another controversy on Interesting Fact of the Week, but, you know, I guess we'll find out.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what. I wanted to prepare for the Interesting Fact of the Week, but since I don't know what it is, there's no way for me to prepare, so you just got to lay it on me.
All right. So here's our Interesting Fact of the Week. So Doug, in the spirit of Valentine's Day, Takosubo cardiomyopathy is a condition that is commonly called either true love syndrome or forever single syndrome or broken heart syndrome. And again, that's Takosubo cardiomyopathy. And I'll leave it up to the audience to send in, email me if I mispronounce that. And I may have, because I forgot to look that up before the show.
Okay. Well, so Takosubo sounds like some kind of mashup between Mexican food and Japanese food. And then cardio, heart, myo. I'm going to go with true love syndrome.
True love. Actually, you were close when you thought of, the myopathy, like bad. It's broken heart syndrome.
Oh, myo, bad. Yeah. I need to work on my Latin. Broken heart syndrome. I've heard of that.
Oh, have you? Okay. Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. But Fred, in the spirit of Valentine's Day, I was going for true love.
Yeah. I guess I did kind of throw you off by saying in the spirit of Valentine's Day, It is Stump the Co-Host. That's it. That's the subtitle of this section now. So I'll give you a bonus question, Doug. So according to an 80-year study from the University of California, which gender had a longer life expectancy as a married person versus a single person? So which gender lived longer as a married person versus single?
So which gender? First of all, Fred, now this is a bit of a pet peeve of mine. I hope people don't get annoyed. But whatever you're reading was obviously written after 1990, because before about 1990, when we wanted to talk about male and female, we talked about sex. Which sex survives longer as a married person is how that would have been written back before we
that's
all
a good point.
decided to go insane. But anyway, again, it relates back to the same type of insanity. I forget what Dominic Enyart calls it on his show. I think he calls it creepy, weird sex stuff. Yeah, and so you can't say the word sex in a biological context anymore because sex means creepy, weird sex stuff. Anyway. It's all a big mess.
So you have a 50-50 shot here.
Okay, yeah. At least we know there's only two. Even if you want to call them genders, right?
Yeah.
There's only two. There's male and female.
Yeah, you don't have a 25% chance. You got a 50% chance.
Okay, so all right. So who lives longer? Obviously, the woman lives longer.
Oh
no.
Yeah. So no, actually that was my first intuition. But if you think about how this question is written, which gender had a longer life expectancy as a married person? So there's this thing called the Terman Life Cycle Study. It's an ongoing project started in 1921, and it found that steadily married men were likely to live substantially longer than divorced or remarried men, whereas divorced women lived about as long as they would have if they had stayed married. So, yeah. And it reminds me of, these other studies, and actually life insurance. You just look at life insurance rates. If a guy's wife dies, his life insurance rates will go up. They're without question, because studies show that guys don't do well when their spouses die. But it's funny, if we die and our wives are, left behind, they're still here, their life insurance rates don't really go up. I mean, it's
right.
I would hope that my wife cares that they do, I'm sure they care if we die and they get sad for a while, but God built them so much better as far as emotionally. Men and women are different, but of course equal in God's eyes, but he built women more emotionally robust. And so they handle stuff like that better. They probably grieve better, whatever. And it just, over time, it doesn't impact them like it does a guy. So, again, if there's two things that makes a guy's insurance rate goes up, and that's if he retires too early, retires without something to do, or his wife dies. So anyways, a couple of Valentine's interesting facts, Doug.
Well, that makes sense now. So I had thought, like in the McBurney family, I'm pretty sure all the women outlived the men as far back as I can recall. And you're right, they grieve for a little while, but then it's kind of like they're on vacation. They're like, okay, I can take it easy now. They live a nice, long, robust life. Yeah, wow.
Yep. Well, anyways, Doug, we probably should get to the rest of Dr. Tour's interview. Let's run the tape.